McLean. Dick Coach's Corner.
You're listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer.
For someone to explain.
Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby.
The distinction between these mandatory.
Sharing ideas to make the game better.
Okay, welcome to episode number 39 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Murray Kinsella. Murray is a sports journalist based in Ireland who writes extensively about the technical aspects of rugby. He writes primarily with the 42.ie, a news source for Irish sports fans, but has also worked with TV3, Air Sport and the Rugby site. His analysis work is a great resource for rugby coaches around the world, and it's a pleasure to have him on the show. So welcome, Murray.
Thanks for having me. Thanks very much for the kind words, and I've been loving the podcast. Certainly a learning resource for me, and I'm pretty flattered that you asked me, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, awesome. Thanks very much, and stoked you're listening, and yeah, it's great to have you on. And you know, like I said in the intro, I've followed a lot of your analysis you've done in the past, and in terms of learning for me as a coach, it's really helped. So thanks for all you're doing there too. Yeah,
no problem. I'm flattered that any coaches really are reading the work. I think I'm probably a little bit behind in knowledge in terms of technical and tactical stuff towards a lot of coaches. But yeah, I'm doing my best. I'm trying, and I'm constantly watching rugby and trying to speak to coaches and learn from any resource I can get my hands on, really.
Yeah, could be worse things to do with your time, huh?
It's a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. So, what's a bit of a backstory on your education and your sporting background to where you are now?
Yeah. So I'm from Waterford in the southeast of Ireland. Grew up there. Went to Waterpark Rugby Club is where my kind of rugby career began, I suppose. It's a pretty small club, but pretty proud club, and they just got a Ireland international through recently, Jack O'Donoghue. Some people might be aware of him. So that's a big kind of boost for the club down in Waterford. I played in school as well, in Newtown School, which wasn't a big rugby school, but we kind of trained 4 days a week, 5 days a week, a match as well. So actually got our hands on the ball an awful lot, a lot of tip rugby, touch rugby kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a great kind of background for me. I then went on and played underage rugby for Munster, under 19 and 20, and I managed to get a couple of caps for Ireland under 19 as well. Went into the Munster Academy and spent a couple of years there at the same time that I was studying in Limerick. I did a degree in English and new media, so I've kind of combined the two of those eventually into this career. But yeah, it kind of set me up nicely to have that bit of playing background, I think, and certainly gave me a bit of a head start maybe with the knowledge and kind of analysis of the game. Although I probably didn't grasp every opportunity I had in that regard. But yeah, definitely a useful kind of background for coming into this profession now.
Oh, absolutely. Sounds great. And so in terms of your analysis work, who have been some of your main influences?
Yeah, so I guess from my time at Munster, a guy called Ian Costello, he's head coach now at Nottingham over in England in the Championship. But he was in the academy at the time, and he was also my club coach in UL Bohemians in Limerick. Really strong on the technical and tactical side of the game, and he just loved his analysis. He lives and breathes rugby, so he was a big influence, I'd say, in that regard. Again, I probably didn't engage with it in that way as much when I was playing, which is kind of bizarre to say. But I don't know. Like, honestly, my knowledge of the game now is very different to what it was when I was playing. You know, even getting Munster A caps and not really thinking about the game all that much. You know, I just fit into the starter play, then try and stick to the structure and not really think about the game too much. But then when you kind of get out of it, you almost think about all the learning you've taken on board. And, you know, we were doing analysis every day, really breaking down every kind of aspect of your game, looking at team trends, trying to look at other teams and what they were doing and other players as well. So, yeah, that kind of time was really good for the analysis I'm doing now. You also had a guy like Jason Holland, who was with Munster at the time, that I had a couple of caps for the A team, and he's obviously with the Canes now and a brilliant young coach.
Yeah.
So he was great to get exposed to. And also, like now, day to day, just working as I suppose, on the reporting side of being a rugby journalist, you're engaging with coaches all the time. Guys like Joe Schmidt and Bernard Jackman, people like Gregor Townsend, basically anyone you interview, you're trying to get whatever knowledge you can out of them. And all those guys have been good, and they may encourage you one way or maybe suggest something that you got slightly wrong. So that kind of feedback is great, even though coaches can be a little bit, I don't know, skeptical or wary of journalists rather. So you're trying to get the balance there, but I suppose you're exposed to it all the time, even beyond the technical and tactical. I suppose that mindset as well. Like so many coaches now are talking about growth mindset and all this kind of stuff, and it really does rub off on you, and you kind of try and translate it into your own work.
Oh, that's great. And I think the story you told there about when you're playing compared to what you know now about the game, I think a lot of coaches would also understand that. I know my first year of coaching, I just realised how little about rugby I actually knew. It's amazing.
I think a lot of players can probably relate to that as well. Like, even sometimes you see, like, we'll probably talk about Italy and England at the weekend, but some of the England players who hadn't really been aware of that kind of aspect of the game, maybe hadn't seen it in action. And I think when you're playing, you often tend not to really watch that much rugby apart from your analysis and your own games, and you're very, very kind of self-focused. So I think like the biggest thing for me in the last couple of years, beyond even influences, is just watching as much rugby as I can, and always taking that kind of mindset of like, why is this team doing this? Why is that player doing that? And you can kind of learn an awful lot that way. So yeah, it's a different mindset when you're playing. I know some players are very tactically aware, obviously, but I was certainly pretty much straight up and do what I was told.
Okay, so in your time that you've been doing the analysis work, what have been some of the bigger changes you've seen to the game over that period of time?
Yeah, like I think the biggest thing in the last 5 to 10 years even is the defence in rugby. It's just so good now. Like recently we did a bit of a project looking back at amateur rugby on the 42.e back to 1995. And obviously it's a very, very different game, but it's almost comical the lack of defence there. And even going into the early 2000s, there's just not much system, not much structure. I wonder how many players were really working on their technique, whereas now pretty much every player is proficient in all sorts of different kind of tackle techniques, and the line speed now, the consistency of it is really, really strong across the board. There's so much pressure being put on the attack, and I think that's one of the big trends really, is that most teams now are using their defense as an attacking weapon and trying to get the ball back and score. You're seeing that with most successful teams. Saracens in England have been really good at that. The Highlanders, of course, down in Super Rugby, they score these amazing tries, and people who check out the highlights probably go, that's the rugby we should be playing up here in the Northern Hemisphere. But a lot of it is down to their kind of kicking game and the pressure they put back on the opposition like that, and working really hard on that kind of space in the pitch between the kick and actually following up on it. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed in the last couple of years, and it keeps going that way. And I think a lot of head coaches, even who are probably spending a lot of time on attack before, are almost focusing a little bit more on defence.
Yeah, and I think there's strong influence, obviously, going back to the late 90s when people like Muggleton and the like were involved with forming a fairly structured defence into international sides. It's just kept growing and growing, and now you see a lot of ex-rugby league players like Farrell, and I don't know if Les Kiss is ex-rugby league, but he's
he is. Yeah, he's worked in league. Yeah. It has been a big thing, and like even Sean Edwards, I suppose, at Wales, who's kind of, I suppose, had so much credit for that original Blitz thing and bringing it into Europe, and a lot of league influence. But I guess a lot of those guys coming over were very, very professional. So it's not even just that they have better knowledge from having been in league. It's just the fact that they were a lot more professional, a lot more kind of structured in their coaching and in terms of the systems they put in place on the pitch now. And I think, if you went on the pitch now without having good systems and structures, you had to look at the Sunwolves the other day against the Hurricanes. I know they're playing a vastly superior bunch of individuals, but after 2 weeks of training, without the chance to get their kind of systems and structures in place, they were just utterly exposed. So yeah, it's the vital thing in rugby now, because attacks obviously keep improving as well, and if your defence isn't there, you're just going to get exposed every time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's move on to the Six Nations. I got to say, this year's Six Nations tournament, we're only three rounds into it, but it's just been outstanding for mine. And you personally, what have you taken from the tournament in terms of like general themes across all teams that you're seeing in attack and defence?
Yeah, so I think it has been kind of developing to a more a kind of wider style of rugby, and teams are holding their width better. Maybe not even going to the width all the time, but a team like Scotland probably is a good example under Vern Cotter. They still do a lot of the one-out runner stuff. There's a lot of multi-phase attack, obviously, in the 22 when the defence is full of bodies, the front line is full of bodies. but they hold the width really well. And then when they've got to 8 or 9 phases, their wings and their fullbacks, Stuart Hogg, they're in those channels waiting for the opportunity and getting better at identifying the opportunity to go to that width that they've held. Like previously, even with a team like Ireland, they really narrowed up in the 22, and the chance to do that just wasn't there. So I think that is a bit of a theme. Pretty much all the teams now are playing with a very positive mindset between the two 22s and keeping a lot of ball in hand. The kicking game in the Six Nations has always been a strength and will continue to be. But I think generally it's just a more, I suppose, a freer kind of attacking philosophy and allowing players to make those decisions a little bit more. So it's been really positive. I think certainly fans and spectators are loving it. Would you go along with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I agree, and I think every team's got their own subtleties, and we'll get to that when we look in, go through the individual teams. But I see a lot of in defence. I'm seeing, some Brian O'Driscoll style 13s shooting up to really block that outside channel to try and nullify that wide attack. After, like you say, after a team's gone through a couple of phases, you'll see that real decision-making aspect come into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have my notes here in front of me, and that's one of the things. You're almost seeing the kind of edge of the defence take probably a bigger risk than before. Like guys are going up when there's overlaps there. In the past, you might have sat off or maybe shot up and then drifted onto the edge. But now they're going, and they're going all the way. And if you don't make that play, it's going to be a possible try. There's a kind of, I suppose, a ballsier decision making on the edge of the defence now. And certainly with Ireland, again, you mentioned Andy Farrell. That's what he wants to see. The times Ireland have been exposed in wide channels, it's been, people are saying, their defence is too narrow. But if you look back, it's probably those times where the wing or the 13 or whoever is on the edge just didn't go. They kind of came halfway and stopped. But yeah, I think a lot of the defence coaches want those, even with an overlap, just go and stop the ball.
All right. So looking at the individual teams, what if we start with just France and looking at how they're playing the game this year? I'm really enjoying watching them play. I wouldn't say the France of old, but it's totally different. You can't compare generations, but they're playing a really attractive brand of running. They rely on some huge men coming through the middle, but they've potentially got a world-class backline with Seren and Lopez and Lamarat and Fofana when he's healthy. But Fiku has been, he's been amazing. And then, you look at the forwards, the Garado and Picamoles, and then Gordon. He's been a real bolter at 7. So they're playing great rugby, I think. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the kind of slight resurgence. I'm always cautious about getting too excited about France because every year we kind of talk them up and then they let us down a little bit.
Break your heart.
Yeah, that's it. But I definitely have a soft spot for French rugby. I actually spent a year over there just after university, after I'd finished up kind of with the Munster Academy. I spent a year playing all the way down in Fédéral 3, which is like the 5th tier of French rugby. So it was a bit wild and there was a lot of 30-man brawls and things like that. But I also got a great insight into French rugby, and I did a lot of traveling around to all the clubs. So yeah, I definitely have a soft spot for them. They've been really good since November. I think Guy Novez is adding a little bit of structure and shape into their attack, as well as kind of building on that, I suppose, that kind of general movement philosophy he's always had in Toulouse, whereby you're kind of playing what you're seeing and it's heads up and players making decisions for themselves. I think we've mentioned the defence as being so organised that you often can't have that kind of classic jouet French style anymore. You just need a bit of shape, and it's interesting that when they add that bit of shape, it actually kind of brings out the more traditionally kind of flair side of French rugby, because players have now a little bit more time and space, and they're in the right place to actually use their decision making, use their footwork, use their acceleration, and all those individual skills that they always have. They've kind of moved into that 1-3-3-1 shape in attack, where they're holding Louis Picamoles usually in the left kind of 15-meter channel and Guirado out in the right. Then you have your 3 pods of kind of really heavy ball carrying forwards in between the 2 15s. So it's something that they're not really doing particularly brilliantly at the moment. And I think when you're working with those French players who probably haven't been brought up in shapes like that, or who have been brought up with the style of play where you're just kind of getting around the pitch and making it up as you go along with your kind of individual skills, they are kind of struggling to find that shape or to keep that shape at times. Like Australia played the 1-3-3-1 and they're unbelievably disciplined in keeping the shape. Like literally every time they're in phase attack, you can clearly pick out their shape there. So France are probably a work in progress in that regard. But I think, like you've mentioned, all those brilliant individuals, and I think if you're kind of creating more opportunities for guys like that to, I suppose, flit around those forward pods and work off Louis Pickmo's in a 15-meter channel when he's running against, say, an outside centre or a wing where he's always going to win that contest, they'll be in a better place. So I think, it's positive, and off the pitch as well, they're getting their act together as well. Bernard Laporte he's a really good kind of rugby man. He's in charge of the FF4 now, and already he's talking about kind of union contracts for players, so they've more time with the national team. So yeah, I mean, that stuff helps. You as a coach, just having more time with the players is unbelievably valuable. And they've had that before this and during this Six Nations. Actually, they, before the Ireland match last year at that time of year, they were playing top 14 rugby, but this year they had a rest weekend and more chance to train with the national team. So, like, it's scary to think how good France could be if they really get their act together. I remember Paul O'Connell saying to me once that, if Joe Schmidt had his hands on those players and really got them organised, no one could stop them. So let's hope they don't get too organised.
Yeah, well, Joe's signed for a couple more years, so that's good. But I've always thought that they're a team that hasn't won a World Cup that should have. And the fact that this was the first Six Nations where they've actually been together as a squad for the entire time. They don't go back to their clubs, and then, like you said, they're kind of mirroring the Irish model where they sign 30 players to the national team, and then distribute those to the club sides. Look out. I think that's scary, but like you say, you can't get too overconfident there because there could be some kind of internal revolt, and it all goes up in the air.
That's it. You have to be careful what you wish for. But yeah, huge population, and as you say, lots of amazing athletes. So I think the raw materials are there. I don't know. I guess I wonder what it'd be like from your point of view as a coach, to have players that are so brought up in a system like that where they're very individualistic, and then trying to put structure around that. I guess that would be a huge challenge.
Yeah, well, I think where they are vulnerable is when they are playing that 1-3-3-1 is on turnover ball from attack to defence. That's where there's going to be that split second of uncertainty and a bit of disorganisation, and that's where some teams can really pounce on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting then, they seem to be still most dangerous when they get a turnover, even against Ireland last weekend. The two times they looked most threatening almost were when they broke out of their 22 after knock-ons or after one turnover.
Spenning did one, right?
Yeah, that's it. And Nakatasi the other time. So they're always going to have that. But yeah, a lot of threat there, and definitely improving, I think.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, on to Scotland, another favourite of mine. Vern Cotter's done amazing things there, and what a second half against Wales on the weekend. And I just love the way that they seem to be relying very heavily on Finn Russell, and then he links with his outside backs like Hogg, Maitland when he wasn't selected last time, but Visser, that try that Visser scored versus Wales in the second half was a perfect example where they really rely on him to some big ball carriers like the Gray brothers in the midfield, and then linking with Finn Russell to link with his outside backs is a big theme that I'm seeing there. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it. They've always had the kind of huge work rate in between the 15-meter channels, and then they've linked that now to the individual skill that they've probably always have and haven't always utilised. Like Finn Russell's getting nice and flat to the gain line.
That's great,
and his range of passing is really beautiful to watch. So he's dragging the best out of all the players around him and demanding that they get up and challenge the defence. And you saw that exactly. A great example where Hogg, literally the only thing he could do was catch and pass really accurately. An unbelievably difficult skill, but he pulled it off brilliantly. I'm enjoying him on counter-attack as well. I think the whole team is kind of really more so aware than ever that they have a role to play in his counter-attacking. You're seeing the guys like the kick escort where they're kind of blocking, I suppose, or shadowing chasers, shepherding the guys chasing the kick and giving Hogg just that split second or that time to land after he catches the ball and then take off where he's so dangerous. And so I think, we've seen probably more cohesive focus on allowing him get those opportunities. One of the things actually I noticed in the Ireland match was interesting defensively. It's only I suppose a micro little skill, but it was really important because Ireland's kind of work on the ground after they've been tackled is always really exceptional. I think Joe Schmidt calls it body ball. and he's got massive demands there. You know, if someone's turned over, the first thing he'll look at is the ball carrier, and all the players pretty much, they kind of fear the review if they've been turned over and they haven't fought enough on the ground. So yeah, like that's been a big theme in rugby across the board, is guys rolling and twisting and turning and that little weasel movement on the ground just to get their hands free of the jackal. But what the Scottish guys did really well was, and again, bending the laws as the best teams do, they really held the tackle on the ground really firmly, didn't release after they completed the tackle, so that the Irish guys, the ball carrier on the ground, couldn't actually twist and contort his body to get a really good clean present. And I thought Scotland did that really well, and it's a simple little tactic, but it actually had a really big effect on that game in Murrayfield, and there were some crucial turnovers against Ireland kind of directly as a result. So I guess it shows that Scotland focusing in on those little skills, and I suppose in the game it's easy to get caught up in massive kind of game plans and structures, but a simple little thing like that, I guess, can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think they must have done some good intel on the referee, because you know some refs are going to ping you straight away, and others will give you that couple of seconds there. So there's obviously been some analysis there as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because then in Rome, Ireland were adding even an extra role into their kind of body ball on the ground. Like they had, again, analysed the ref and realised we're going to get away with this. So it was almost kind of, you're almost thinking, geez, he's going to get a penalty against him there. But a ref analysis really on the ball. And yeah, it shows. It's really interesting to see that between two different games a week after each other.
Okay, well, Italy haven't gone through this tournament unnoticed after last weekend's game at Twickenham. We'll get to the no tackle call in a minute, but what about some just general attack and defence that Italy's been doing under Conor O'Shea?
Yeah, pretty much very poor in the first 2 rounds, and probably what we had seen from Italy. And I think Conor O'Shea, although maybe doesn't have too much hair left anymore, he was tearing what was left out. And maybe wondering, geez, this is a bigger job than I thought. They're not as fit as other teams, I don't think. The Italian clubs at the moment just aren't good setups. I think across the nation of Italy, rugby, they just understand that it's not good enough, and the national team is always going to suffer unless they can bring that right up there. So I think they've got to sort out the Treviso and Zebra first before fixing anything else, really, and get fitter players who can actually defend through multiple phases, because Ireland in Rome, for example, you know, they just got to 10 phases and then there was going to be a mistake literally every time. You could nearly bank on it. And that's going to be the go-to target for everyone. That's where we're going to discuss the tactic. That's where that tactic came out of, is because Conor O'Shea realised if England can get to 7, 8, 9, 10 phases, then they're going to score a try every single time. So that's how they put that tackle-only tactic into place. So I think the challenge for Italian rugby is beneath the national level, and I think attacking wise too, they just weren't showing an awful lot of what they maybe had trained for, because there was individual errors and technical errors in the early kind of phases of their attack. So it was very frustrating to watch, to be honest, in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and I think after the weekend, Andre Venter put something out on Twitter saying, and Conor O'Shea as well, I really like the way they're talking in terms of this is a process, it's time, it's not an overnight thing. But Andre Venter put a tweet out saying, we just wait till we get fitter. And I don't think that was a tweet to his followers. I think that was a tweet to the players and the organisation that, you know, we've got work to do and it's coming, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like physical fitness, you just can't, like, again, when we get caught up in the game, you kind of sometimes lose focus of that. But it has kind of, even more so in the media this year, there's been a kind of big emphasis on it. Eddie Jones is talking about his kind of tactical periodization or whatever, and every single team is focused on training at an intensity that is actually higher than how they're playing. Obviously GPS has kind of pushed that forward. I was talking to a guy called John Farrell. He's an Irish guy working with the Georgian Union. Talking to him very recently, and he's talking about how he kind of keeps an eye on that side of things for Georgia, just making sure that they're training at a rate that is higher than match intensity. Then on the flip side, speaking to someone recently, an Irish player over in France, and he's saying he can't get over the lack of high-speed intensity in their training sessions, and that's actually causing injuries, because players need to be up at that level and they need to be used to that high-speed intensity. And in France, there's still a bit of a culture of being on the pitch for 2 hours, you know, at a time. Wow. Under some of the French coaches, and not sprinting enough. So yeah, that's been a really interesting aspect, and I don't think Italy are probably not there yet anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. And on to the no tackle call. It was just it's. I've spoken to it's just polarizing. It's like you either love it or you hate it. Some of the purists hate it. I just thought it was fascinating. I loved it. I think it's a one-trick pony. You're not going to be able to play a game like that ever again with that amount of use of the tactic. But you can choose when to use it. Maybe in the opposition 22 when they're trying to exit, that's a good time, a low-risk time. But I just thought it was wonderful, and I found myself just watching more how not the Italians doing it, but more how the English players were reacting to it, and it was obvious. It was the first time they'd ever seen it or been exposed to it.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. I was kind of looking into this, and I think the Championship Canada are playing in the moment, the Rugby Americas. They're using that trial law, aren't they, where you actually can't do this anymore. There's like an offside line formed by one player arriving at the ruck.
Yeah, they did that in the Mitre 10 too, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they did that last year as well. So it's certainly something that has been spoken about by World Rugby and their kind of law review group, and the Chiefs have been frustrating opposition since like 2015 with it, and there have been other instances as you mentioned. But yeah, it was kind of bizarre to see England struggling to adapt on the pitch. I think there probably was an element of certainly of Hartley and Haskell kind of feigning ignorance, almost just trying to kind of almost bully Poit into changing his opinion of it. But they certainly needed to adapt quicker, and it was weird that the kind of coaching message didn't go on there, just to go right through the guts and a really high tempo pick and drive game where you force them to make a ruck, or else we're just going to score through the middle of you. But yeah, I loved it as well. I was kind of laughing out loud watching it because it was just so, I don't know, it was just so genius in an almost evil way. And it was a rugby game we'd never ever seen before, and the debate and discussion has been just brilliant in the last couple of days, that everyone's talking about a tactical element of the game rather than some absolute nonsense storyline about some player or whatever. So I've loved the last couple of days, but interesting to see what's going to happen. Do you think they will change this at the highest level?
I don't know. It'd be a knee-jerk reaction, I feel. I think it's just like you could look at any law in the book and find a little tweak there that you could use. You might not be able to use it as much, but I like it. I think it creates fast-thinking players, and if the defence are doing it, then the attack have to be fast-thinking as well. How do we counter-attack this? Well, keeping the ball alive, pick and go, going to your maul game. I think I'd hope they'd be, take a bit of time in deliberating about whether to change the law, because I think there's advantages to keeping it and some disadvantages if they don't. I don't know if I'd like to see internationals played like that to that extent in the future, and I don't think that was Italy's intention anyhow. But I think there's room for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think anything like that, any fresh thinking, and it was a really ballsy decision, wasn't it? Like to actually go and pursue for the whole game. It could have spectacularly backfired, and they were really disciplined in how they did it. It was a really well coached team in that aspect of the game. You had like two or three guys just in behind the tackle as it was, waiting just a little. That's it. I'm loving all the terminology as well, I have to say. The fox is brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what now happens in the next couple of games, and I think everyone's anticipating more instances of it. Even speaking to a couple of amateur rugby players over here, a colleague of mine, Rory O'Connor with the Irish Independent, he was saying his game midweek this week was it was a kind of junior 4 match, but there was a couple of instances of tackle only tactics. So it's great, and I think everyone's engaged with it in a really good way. I agree with you. I don't see an instant change happening, and I don't think there should be. Definitely teams can figure it out, and if Italy do it again on that scale, I think they'll be probably punished. I don't think they will try to do it on that scale again. It was a brilliant one-off match, and I think it'll go down in kind of rugby folklore a little bit.
I think so. And I think it's weird. One of the things I really enjoyed about it was just looking at Poit. He just looked like he was having an absolute ball out there.
He was loving it. He was absolutely loving it. Because he got to show off, listen, I know the law here. You guys don't know anything.
Yeah, he's quoting law numbers, and he's telling Haskell he's not a coach, so he can't help him. So I just thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. One of the things that was interesting was when Launchbury, I think it was 29th or 30th minute, down the England 22, when he grabbed Luke McLean. And tried to create a ruck, which we've seen David Pocock do in the past for the Brumbies against the Chiefs. and then the Chiefs were pinged for offside. But Poit told him, you can't do that. And having followed up a little bit on it, that's the directive that the referees were getting from World Rugby, is that the defending team actually has to actively engage and look to form a ruck. So that grabbing of a player, you can't do that anymore according to the latest directive. So it'll be interesting to see, again, another option reduced, how the attacking team reacts to that.
And also, the rabbit or the fox, I can't remember what they called it, but that was a new directive as well. He or she can't come within a metre of the scrum half, otherwise you're technically not coming through a gate. So Italy were obviously very, very across that, and very well prepared for it.
So basically, the Chiefs just went around the back and stood right beside the scrum half. This was against the Stormers in 2015, and they just smashed him as soon as he picked up the ball. Jaco Paper was the ref. It was the Stormers weren't happy. There was those big angry South African sides didn't like it. But Jaco Paper was the ref, and he kind of spoke to Liam Essom and said you can't approach the ball from that angle. There's a tackle zone. I don't think he used the term tackle zone, but I think that's what referees are using. So 1 meter kind of radius around the tackle, apart from if you're coming through the gate, which isn't even in the law book. But again, referees love these terms. So I think to have that there is absolutely crucial, because if you can come around and smash the scrum half, well, then things get really, really ugly. So I think standing a metre back is probably a fair kind of balance on it.
Yeah. Okay, well, on to England. They're probably not playing too far away from traditional English rugby. They might be getting a bit more width off guys like Ford, still very set piece dominant. What are you seeing in England in terms of attack and defence? Probably hard to go on last weekend's game because it was quite disruptive. But in the two games before, as Eddie Jones has said, they're winning ugly, and they're on their way to 18, which will be a mouth-watering one at Aviva if they get past next round. What are you seeing specifically with England?
Yeah, it's an incredible run, like 10 consecutive Six Nations wins. I think they're on a great winning run, and they don't really ever look like losing. You mentioned Ford there. His combination with Farrell, I think, is really developed. Having two out halves in the team, 10 and 12, just opens up everything for them in phase play. And maybe they haven't got to where they want to with that, but I think we've seen signs of it. Even something like the Elliot Daly try, the winning try against Wales, when Jonathan Davies kind of kicked out,
he's out,
failed to find touch. But two just incredible passers of the ball, just to get across to the other edge of the pitch, and give Daly a chance. Alex Cuthbert obviously didn't cover himself in glory, and the Welsh certainly could have done better to get guys on their feet before they kicked the ball, taking an extra phase in that regard. I thought it was interesting to hear Sean Edwards, the defence coach, talk about that after the game. We dropped out of our system where we would have taken an extra phase before kicking to get guys on our feet. That was interesting. But those two passers, that's like an open field kind of counter-attacking example. But even in face play, the two of them are really good at dragging in defenders, delaying their passes. And then when Ford goes out the back door to his 12, it's another out half who can make another good decision on top of that. So I think it really adds to their attacking threat. And I think the more that develops, the more we'll see their game open up beyond just that set piece and the kind of physicality. But when they come to Dublin on the last weekend, we're all hoping that it's going to be playing for the championship. And those big forwards are like Itoje and Launchbury and Laws. They're unbelievably powerful. Yeah, they're really good technically. Their tackling is really good, and I'd be a little bit worried if the game was played in poor conditions, because I think around the fringes of rucks and tighter in, they're very, very strong. So I think that 10-12 combo developing is going to be really important for them. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, great. All right, and on to everyone's favourite team, Ireland. A very Joe Schmidt style team, very reliant on set piece dominance. With really creative, I think the term's power plays that's used over there off that first phase and maybe a couple of phases after. Big ball runners like CJ Stander and Omani and O'Brien and those kind of guys getting over the gain line first, and then really looking to stretch the attack. I think relying heavily on Conor Murray's box kicks. He's got to be one of the best in the world at it, if not the best. And Yeah, some real subtle differences too when Sexton is in or out. Like the Sexton loop play really opened up the French on the weekend, whereas when it's Paddy Jackson, it's some subtleties, some subtle differences in the attack as well. What are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely. Like Paddy Jackson's a really good international out half, and I don't think anyone praising Sexton, like it's not a slide on him. Sexton is just at another level. His decision making is incredibly good. Like, you know, he's 95% brilliant decisions. It's interesting you mentioned the Paris plays. I've actually just been doing a bit of analysis today on a particular one of them, which dates all the way back to 2012, Leinster against Clermont in the Heineken Cup final. It's the one where they kind of strike in midfield and then they bounce back against the grain and they run a kind of dummy loop off one of their forwards with Conor Murray or the scrum half coming around, and then they send an inside pass to the fullback. You know, if you saw it in action, I think you probably recognise it. And it's interesting to follow over the years. I went through a couple of examples and how he's kind of slightly tweaked it. He added a phase in here. He actually struck off scrum a couple of times and went to the width and tried it there rather than the centre of the pitch. And then against France, they added in a fourth phase. So he kind of took France through another phase, tried to get them lazy or even folding lazily around the corner. And they should, you know, 6th minute rather, they actually should have scored off it. Rob Kearney fell just kind of going through. And if he had gone through there, I think it would have been a very different game because there was support runners actually ahead of the ball, kind of waiting for the line break, as they always are. So yeah, that's always a really interesting aspect to follow with Ireland, because Joe Schmidt's kind of tactical brain is just really the very best in the world, probably. So I always enjoy kind of digging into that aspect of their game. But yeah, they've kind of developed a little bit more in the last probably 2 years since the Rugby World Cup, when they did have a lot of one-out runners and a lot of passes in their game, but the passes were just to a forward crashing into contact.
The defense, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Like that's developing. Like the rate of one-out runners is dropping now. Joe Schmidt was happy to point out after the first 2 rounds, after they had played Italy, in fairness now, that they had there were 3 other teams who had more one-out runners than them. But no, it definitely has improved in that regard. And I think they're trying to play, especially kind of from halfway to the opposition 22. You mentioned kind of Sexton adding subtleties. It was really interesting to see them use a kind of tip-on pass and then out the back door after that to Sexton, just to give that time just in behind those kind of first 4 defenders, and then go from there. They didn't manage to cut the French apart rather too often, but again, I think you're seeing those subtleties added in game by game, and definitely a better variety to their attack. They're always going to be very focused on the kind of ruck quality and ball carrying quality in the 22, and like they are brilliant at those things. You see, you know, it's easy just to say, oh, they're one-out team, but actually not appreciate the skills that are involved in that. Like guys closing off the kind of far corner of a ruck, tying in defenders that way, the kind of latching or leeching they use pretty much every carry to kind of get a 2-on-1 in the tackle. Their footwork is really good. They pirouette, they step back inside to get a weak shoulder. So they're really good at that kind of stuff, and I don't think that'll ever go out of their game.
Yeah. They probably offset that instead of offloading. They're not a team that offloads a lot.
No, they aren't. They still aren't. They're slightly the numbers have slightly gone up in that regard, but they're still a little bit more kind of hesitant than other teams, and they place a massive focus on keeping possession and getting through phases. So yeah, I don't think they're going to see. I don't think they're ever going to be throwing the ball when it's a 50-50. But yeah, they do offload when they're in behind the tackle, and it's a good offloading opportunity. Defensively, Andy Farrell has probably changed things up a little bit, and they're very aggressive now. And I think they're probably not as focused on not giving up line breaks. I think, like, obviously you never want your defense to be broken down, but their scramble defense is really excellent to the point that it looks like they work on that a lot. And I think they're happy to take a bit more of a risk to get a big tackle and a turnover opportunity than they were before. So he's added that into the defensive mindset as well. He's a big character, and he kind of drives them emotionally as well, I guess.
Yeah, I think we saw in the Scotland game, the opening Scotland game, the two things that Ireland really are strong at is their line speed and their set piece dominance, and both of those aspects were just a bit off for whatever reason on the day. And so if teams have got a chance, that's where they'll be targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like those Scotland examples, like 2 tries come down to minor things again, like within a system, like guys just not folding around the corner early enough, or maybe not the edge defender not dragging enough width into the defensive line. and big kind of, I suppose, big errors and big try concessions can come out of that stuff. But one little interesting thing, again, I just looking through their games today, one of the things they're doing in the opposition 22, and I think this actually was the tactic that actually kind of sparked Italy's thinking around their tackle-only tactic, because Conor O'Shea mentioned it was Conor Murray incident in Rome where they felt they should have had a penalty.
Yeah, that's right.
But the referees explained, this was okay. There was no ruck. Basically, Conor Murray, you'll see him if you're watching the opposition 22 when they're going to exit. He kind of stands, he sweeps in behind the line, but as soon as the scrum half gets to the ruck, he starts sprinting towards the defensive line, and his timing is exceptional. Actually, it's really interesting to watch. He's actually bursting up out of the defensive line and getting massive kick pressure, or massive pressure on the kicker rather. And a fair few times now he's kind of managed to make the exit kick really poor by kind of turning the kicker infield or whatever there. But I think that was the incident where probably the referee clarified, look, there's no actual ruck there, and Ireland probably didn't even realise themselves, I don't think, and he kind of rushed up. Italy thought it should be an offside, but yeah, an interesting little tactic. And again, Ireland's counter or kick return game isn't particularly strong, but as that develops, I think Conor Murray getting pressure on the kickers like that will be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you can see what happens. We'll go on to Wales now, and when it is a poor exit, what can happen when your exit isn't spot on against a world class back three, and that happened with the Wales versus England game.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was prime example of just not getting people on your feet, just to follow up the kick. Like even more important than the kicking quality is probably that follow up, and a really poor try to concede at that level. Even though it took really exceptional skills, as we've mentioned, from Ford and Farrell to pass the ball to Daly and a good finish. But it was kind of symptomatic of Wales' Six Nations so far. Loads of brilliant stuff in that game. But just simple mistake that cost them absolutely dearly, and the same against Scotland again. They'll be frustrated where they are, and Ireland are going to Cardiff for round 4, and it's going to be pretty.
That'll be a nasty one.
Pretty big backlash from Wales,
and they'll be ready. Just on Wales, what are they like in terms of outside of Italy in terms of unforced errors? Those kind of stats, are they one of the higher teams in that area? Because you saw a lot of that in the second half of Scotland. They let Scotland get into that game. Or no disrespect to Scotland, they played amazing rugby, but that on the back of a lot of errors too.
Yeah, I don't actually have the stats in front of me, but certainly the impression would be that they're right up there in that department, and errors that are like costing them tries and costing them big territory and good possession. So that's a massive focus for Wales. They're such a strong athletic team, and that was the thing Joe Schmidt's been talking about since he started prepping for this game. They're such good athletes that any let up in your kind of defensive line speed or whatever's involved there, your tackle technique, and they'll absolutely take advantage of that. Their centres are so big and strong. Even their wing, George North, is just a guy who you do not want to get ball in space, because he can smash straight over the top of you. I think it's going to be a tricky one for Ireland, but I fancy them to win in Cardiff. Before the championship, I thought it might be the kind of stumbling block for them, but based on what we've seen so far, I don't think Wales are at their very strongest. They've actually tried to have a bit of a development in terms of their game plan, and they've always been criticised for that kind of, I suppose, Warren ball has been the easy kind of moniker for it, but certainly playing around the corner all the way to one touchline, exhaust that, and then go back. Whereas I think now they're trying to encourage their decision makers to do exactly that and make decisions for themselves.
Well, I was gonna go on to that. Like you're because I'm seeing differences definitely between Howley and Gatlin in attack. You are as well.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it kind of had to go that way anyway. And even if Gatlin was there, I think it would have probably developed that way. But you're certainly seeing more of Howley's philosophy. I think it was interesting to talk to him when they announced him as the Lions coach. I asked him about the attacking philosophy with the Lions. Is it going to be similar to 2013 in Australia when a lot of criticism came the Lions' way for the way they attacked? It was kind of blunt force. But he said, that's not my philosophy. You work with what you have in your team, and I think we're seeing more of that now in the way Wales are trying to add a bit of width and allow their players to make a few more decisions on the pitch.
Yeah, well, that probably leads me to my next question. I think that's classic a triage of how you coach a rugby team is, rather than starting with your attacking and defensive philosophies, you start with what are the bodies that you have and what are their skill sets, and then build from there. Based on what you're seeing in the Six Nations, you got any predictions on how you might see the Lions attacking in their New Zealand tour?
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Like I do think that we're
More
going to.
rugby, awesome.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It never ends. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to getting down to that side of the world. Had a really good trip down there, kind of last September, October, and I was only there for 11 days. But the amount you learn from, even just casual conversations and the coaches over there, incredible. Had some really good visits,
great.
like Crusaders and Hurricanes, and they're quite open, even if they're a little bit kind of suspicious of what you want to know. But the knowledge is incredible. So looking forward to that. In terms of how the Lions play. I do think they'll be like reliant on what have been perceived as the strengths up here in terms of set piece, being physically dominant and quite structured, I suppose, in their play, and maybe a little bit like Ireland in terms of using a lot of pre-prescribed strike plays. But I think there's a realization now that the individual players are actually good enough in terms of their skills and decisions to actually play a bit more in broken field and not actually just kick the ball away when they lose their shape and structure. So I think that will be a bit of a shift under Gatland, probably, who has been quite a prescribed kind of coach in attack, maybe. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what do you reckon? What are you seeing?
Oh, I think the same. I think why would you kick the ball away when you've got guys like Hogg and Sexton and Connor Murray and some massive ball runners. You got to think Atoje, Laws. A bunch of names, the Gray brothers from Scotland. You've got some big body ball runners, and you've got some excellent outside backs. I think it's going to be a different Lions team than you saw in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree completely with that. I think they'll always have those foundational strengths. Like, even look at Ireland's win against Chicago in November, and like they got a lot of praise, deservedly so, for being quite ambitious in how they went about it and actually targeting, listen, they're going to score this amount of tries, we got to score more than them, and not just take points and kick penalties. So I think that'll be really important, that kind of mindset of not just trying to limit what the All Blacks do anymore, recognizing that they are going to score tries and we're going to also score a lot of tries. That may come in different methods, though. I think Ireland, like in that game, 3 of their tries came pretty much directly from mauls. Including the first one and including that Simon Zebo one in the left corner in the second half. So maybe slightly different types of tries, but certainly a more of a try-scoring attitude, I think.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, on to the last question. It leads to tries, and you do a bit of stuff around try-scoring trends in rugby. What are some of the latest trends that you've been seeing?
Yeah, so the most recent teams I've done, actually, the All Blacks I did in November, because they scored so many.
They scored a few tries, yeah.
So many bloody tries last year. 60 tries in 10 tests before November.
Unreal. So oh my God.
It was incredible, yeah. Like for them, a lot of time when you do this, you're kind of backing up your own impression. But for them, the key possession platform were turnover and kick return. They were incredibly good at converting those opportunities. As you know, when you watch the game, like I have the stats here, 35% tries come from turnovers. So that's a key focus for them, and something they obviously train a lot on. It's not just individual skill. They have, as you mentioned, worked hard on being good at having guys in the right places when they turn ball over, and that even builds into their defensive strategy, which goes back to the very start. And in terms of how the game has trended in recent years, is that your attacking strategy is built into that defense, so that even if you get a turnover, you have the right guys in the right places, and they can find them. I always think of the example of the Chiefs, and it was Wayne Smith, I think, talking about it, that Aaron Cruden is always in the right place when we're counter-attacking, and that's not by accident. Because when we defend, he's always out there towards the edge, and we'll find him quickly when we can, and he'll create something. So that was really interesting thought, and I think you're seeing that with the All Blacks as well. Is that we defend to score tries, and I think everyone's kind of on that mindset now. But looking at Ireland then, just before the Six Nations, was interesting because they're such a different team. 58% of their tries from a line-out possession platform. Only 1 from kick return. There was 8 from turnover, but the 8 turnover tries included, I actually termed, when they kicked to a team and the other team attempted to gain possession, maybe had their hand on the ball for a split second but dropped the ball, and there's an instant kind of turnover back to Ireland. So there was a lot of kick pressure in those tries. But the line out is an unbelievably important platform for Joe Schmidt because he can plan out and plot out all those kind of set piece plays and the power plays you mentioned earlier on. So they're the kind of two big projects. I'd love to do more of it, but it's very time consuming. Charlie Morgan, who's doing great work over in England and Wales and Scotland, and more so on the UK teams. He did a great one in England, and it was a little bit more similar to Ireland's trends in terms of, there was line out and set piece and all that. Scrum, those kind of platforms rather than turnover and kick return. So yeah, there's different trends. I don't think one's better than the other. Again, as you said, like you work with what you have, and clearly Ireland and England think that they have players who are really strong in those areas and building off those platforms. And certainly with Ireland, 16 of the 36 tries they scored in the study had actually started in the opposition 5 metre or just slightly outside it. So they were very focused on kicking down into the opposition territory, winning penalties and kicking to there. Whereas New Zealand, of their 60 tries, were scored starting in the opposition 5 metre, whereas they had 16 from between the halfway and the opposition 22 and 15 from between the halfway and their own 22. So very good at striking from further out the pitch, and very good at striking early in the phases. Again, I have the numbers here. The 0 ruck tries was 24 out of 60. Wow. So without a single breakdown, which is really impressive. And again, it's something that you would have had as your own impression watching them, that the fact that they strike to score every single time they get their hands on the ball, it's a really really clinical kind of mindset.
Yeah, and I think that going back to our last question there on how the Lions will play, if you kick to them and it stays in field, it better be contestable, and if it's not, get ready for it coming back with some serious interest, and it won't be kicked back. You wouldn't think it will be coming through the hands, and so that would obviously dictate the style of play that they'll have. So it's gonna be an awesome tour, and I think a crazy amount of games that they play, but it's gonna be fantastic for viewers.
What would be your impression? I know it's very early to be making predictions, but it was interesting. I thought before November, when the All Blacks were on that incredible run, and I guess they still are in a way, but there was a lot of doom and gloom here about, the Lions are going to get hammered over there. What do you kind of think of it now after Ireland maybe beat them in November and seeing the strength of the Six Nations? Would you be a bit more positive about the Lions' chances?
I think the Chicago game was amazing, and just such a great victory. But I think when they lose, they don't tend to lose again very often after that. And New Zealand at home, you just need to look at the Wallabies record there at Eden Park alone to realise that that's a beast that's very hard to tame. And I'd be predicting New Zealand to take it personally. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions can eke one out, but I also wouldn't be surprised if New Zealand win 3-0.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bizarrely difficult thing to do. I think I've been in the process recently of just organising my own travels around the place, and you're uprooting every couple of days, moving to a new city. I'm not going to be training or playing rugby matches, and I'm kind of like, God, this is going to be a bit of an effort. So you can only imagine for a rugby team and a coach trying with such a short space of time. It's an incredibly difficult challenge now, especially considering what we mentioned earlier on about the importance of, say, France getting more time with the players, a couple extra days. So the odds are massively against the Lions. I think.
But it'll be epic, no matter what. All right. Well, we always end the show with the same final 4 questions. When you were a kid growing up, who was one of your favourite players going around that you like to watch?
Yeah, I mentioned my kind of fondness for French rugby there a while ago, and Yannick Josian, the France and Toulouse centre, was probably my kind of, I guess, a role model, because I actually played 12 and I'm tall, I'm 6'4". So he was kind of a guy that I almost looked to model my game on. He was a lanky centre like me, but with a bit more weight, I think. So he was well able to dominate the collisions. But he also had a subtlety to his game. Certainly with the offloading, his offloading ability was just exceptional. Pretty much every time he went into contact, there was a successful offload almost, or else like a pre-contact pass, because he could combine that kind of physical power with really good skill. Yeah, really, really enjoyed watching him play.
Great. Okay. And what about now? Who's one of your favourite players going around?
Yeah, I mentioned him earlier on. Owen Farrell is a guy I'm really enjoying watching at the moment.
Yeah.
An out half by trade with Saracens, but playing at 12 for England. And he's a guy interestingly, I didn't really rate him all that much when he first came through. I actually thought he was a bit limited, and I didn't think he had kind of vision or creativity. But it just goes to show that there are things that you can improve, because now he's spotting passes and he's delaying passes beautifully, and he's creating chances for others, both for Saracens and at times for England. So he's massively improved in that area, and I had thought, probably stupidly on my part, that it wasn't something that you could really grow in your game, but he's a prime example of it, and he's really combative as well. He's really strong.
He's got some starch in his defence, huh?
That's it, and he's not the biggest guy, but geez, he can hit as well, and he's not afraid to throw himself in there. So enjoy it.
His dad's probably helped him out a bit with that, I'd say.
That's it, a good mentor, a good guy.
Great. Okay, on to coaches. Who's a high-profile coach that you like what they're doing and the way they work with their teams?
Yeah, a guy who I haven't met. I haven't really got much chance to kind of get exposed to his actual methods on the training pitch or anything. But Wayne Smith, who I mentioned earlier on, is someone I've always really enjoyed reading about or hearing about from other coaches. Everything, basically every detail that I've heard of him or from him, or videos he's done, or coaching seminars where you've maybe got a secondhand video for someone. He's just really clear and concise, really intelligent, really deep thinking. But also, with that edge, the clarity and kind of distilling the message down into one central point. I think you probably know yourself, as a coach.
So important.
Yeah, there you go. It's incredibly easy. And even when my work with writing, it's something that I probably struggle with quite a bit, is being concise. I definitely struggle with it. There's so much you want to say, but I'm trying to teach myself almost a little bit just to find the really central point and go with that. And he's a guy I've seen that, even talking about culture, he just boils it right down to the main points. And a really influential guy on other coaches from everything I've heard. So
he comes up often in the show, and I'd love to have a chat with him for sure, because I feel the same. All right, and then final question: who's a grassroots coach in your local community that you feel is doing great work and deserves a shout out?
Yeah, well, not totally grassroots, but a guy who's working the development side of Irish rugby is Nigel Carroll. Okay, he's the Connacht Academy manager, and he's also the Ireland Under-20s coach at the moment. And again, a really good thinker about the game, really smart, attacking kind of mind as well, and a really we just before we started, we spoke about the importance of coaches underneath the very top tier, and how vital they are to actually having really good players come through at test level. And I think he's got a really good mindset around that. He's not always focused on winning. He's not always focused on doing exactly the game plan that he thinks might be the best in this particular game. It's more so developing the player, developing the individual.
At that level.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I'm sure you all experience it with yourself, but he's kind of, it's almost selfless in a way, I guess, to think like that. But he's had chances to go to kind of senior teams on professional contracts, but he's happy enough doing what he's doing. And we've seen with Connacht, especially recently, he's getting loads of good players through.
It's unbelievable what's coming out of there. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, so he's a guy, those kind of guys in Irish rugby, and every rugby ever really, are really kind of valuable.
Perfect. All right. Well, it's been a long one, but I've enjoyed it, no doubt. And I really want to thank you for coming on the show, and massive thanks for giving up an hour of your time to talk about rugby. And I'm really excited about the last two rounds of the Six Nations. And hope you enjoy it and enjoy your Lions tour as well. Yeah, cheers. I've really enjoyed the chat. I hope I wasn't waffling on too much, but when I get talking rugby, I find it hard to stop at times. Keep up the great work. I'm really looking forward to all the future podcasts. And again, I'm flattered that you asked me to come on, so thanks very much. Awesome. All right, cheers. Thanks very much, Murray.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us on Twitter at RugbyCoachSCNR or via the website at therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.